Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Good to see everybody. Welcome to my AMA for June, still June. No, we just, this is our transition week of the last day of school was on Tuesday and then camp started on Wednesday. So I'm still a little bit discombobulated of what and where we are. So for any of you that are dealing with the transition to summer with your kids, summer schedules, hope that's going well. I'm gonna pop the chat some guidelines on AMA. I think several of you have been with us before, but just some basics of how we do this. I'm Jill James, if you haven't been here before. It's my company, that's why my name is on it. And this is my monthly subscriber AMA. You can pop questions into the chat at any time. I have some that have been submitted. And you can also DM me if you'd rather not have them in the chat for everybody. And then if you do DM me, I'll just, ask them in the course of the submitted questions. But we can go, up to an hour. Doesn't usually go that long, but as long as you can stay with us, and we are recording, this recording will be available in the newsletter. So if you missed something or you, want to go back over something, it'll be in next week's newsletter. Okay, so let's jump in. So again, hi Amanda. I'm gonna mute everybody just to be safe here. Okay, thank you. Okay. My video set. Okay. Let's answer some questions. Okay. The first one I have, let's see. The first one I have is, what is the Fed and why does it matter to me? So someone must have seen the news yesterday. There was a Fed meeting. So the Fed is the Federal Reserve, and why it matters to you for a small business owner is a couple of reasons. So the Fed is the central bank. They get to set the price for borrowing money. So every rate that you pay is based off the rate that 18 bankers around the country decide is the appropriate amount for making the economy go faster or slower for borrowing. So if you want to buy a house, or you're leaving a balance on your credit card, or you want to borrow money, or even if you want to sell things to large companies, it's good to just kind of know what the interest rate environment is. There's lots of other stuff that the Fed does. I'm drastically oversimplifying for any macroeconomists who watch this in the future. Apologies. But the number one thing for you is to know, like, does the Fed want the economy to go faster or slower, right? So they raising interest rates makes the economy go slower. That's the environment we've been in for the last 18 months. Lowering interest rates makes the economy go faster. And especially if you're selling things to large companies, they will borrow more money and put more behind hiring, investment programs, product investments, if interest rates are lower. So this is kind of a way to, get, as you're forecasting, as you're thinking about the future for your business, it's one thing to think about. If the people that you work with are going to be impacted by this, do you think they'll have more money? Will they have less money? Will they be more eager to make investments and hire people? Will they be less likely? So to me, that's probably the number one reason, just part of thinking about sales of, like, what does the year look like? And then also for yourself, if there are investments that you want to make and you're going to use borrowed money for that, right now it's more expensive than it has been in a while. It's not crazy. Like, I keep telling people that I remember when my parents bought their house and their interest rate was like 18%. Back in the 80s. So, we're not really, getting crushed here at 7, but it's a lot higher than it has been. So, it's, people are choosing not to do things right now because they see it as a more expensive borrowing environment. And it got a lot more expensive fast last year. So I would say, there are like 8 Fed meetings a year. One was yesterday. And in each meeting, they say, here's, we're going to hold, we're going to raise, we're going to lower, or they give hints about, like, when they might do stuff. So if you are trying to, plan or think about, how you think about the coming year or the coming few months, you can look at, just some notes. Every major reporting outlet will cover the Fed. Oops, did I freeze? Oh, yep, all right. What is going on with my internet? Okay, we're back. So every major outlet will report on a Fed decision. So it's not hard to find something. It's probably even in your local paper. So, keep an eye on it. And then next month, 2 months, 3 months, we're kind of looking at stuff, probably not much going to happen until September. September's kind of up in the air, but it's just something to watch and to give you signals about, what you might think about for yourself and for the companies you sell to, for the year ahead. All right. So if the folks who are here live with us, if you have questions, please feel welcome. You can raise your hand, pop it into the chat, whatever I can help you with. Okay, one from Amanda. What are some of the biggest growing pains you see your clients grappling with? Good question. So one of them, I think in particular, is around like sometimes it's the 18-month mark, sometimes it's, 3 to 4 years. But there's just sort of this explosion of decisions to be made and lots of directions you could go. At the beginning, it's sort of like we have one goal and we're going toward it and we know how to get there. And there's just a few decisions that need to be made. And then you hit that goal and then next, like the decision tree blows up. And it's a lot of interdependent decisions. And sometimes, you can't do everything. So the hard part is, how do you decide what to do next? And I think that is where a lot of people get stuck, because it might be, there might be 9 options and they try to do a little bit of all of them instead of choosing a couple of things and doing them really well or really committing. So I find that that really slows down growth when you try to do everything that's an option and keep all your options open versus narrowing and committing to a direction and kind of, testing how that goes. Other growing pains, hiring is a big one, both from how do I do this and, get along? Like if you're a first-time manager, you haven't managed people before, hiring is a big one. And then also just paying for those people and getting used to having that overhead of a salary that every 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, has to be paid, and benefits that have to be paid. It definitely radically changes your business. So I would say, on that front, one, in terms of thinking about who you want to hire, both what skills do they bring? Are they going to help you produce more revenue? Are they going to help you, deliver more product or more services? Or are they, helping you more in the back office? Are they, doing work that isn't necessarily contributing to revenue? That's a big consideration early on if you're growing your capacity to sell and deliver things versus taking care of administrative things. We usually prioritize revenue production first. And try to, solve the administrative stuff as best as we can, but usually without full-time employees. On the kind of people and culture front, if you haven't hired before and you put something on LinkedIn, you're going to get 250, 300 resumes, and it's just people just hitting the button of I might as well apply. It's right here. So, you have to filter through, you have to figure out, who are the 5 to 15 good candidates. How do you talk to them? How do you screen them? How do you onboard them? So going through that process with hiring people is I think, a really big growing pain, especially the first person. Once you've done it a couple of times, it's, the first person, we sort of want them to be a magical unicorn because we have so many needs. And so often, instead of just choosing someone who can take 2 or 3 things or, deliver a certain service, we might go really broad. And that's sometimes problematic. Sometimes it works out. It really just, again, depends what you're trying to solve for. But knowing that first person isn't going to be the only person and their role will narrow a bit over time. Sometimes we hold off until we can find the perfect person, and that's its own problem. So yeah, people and choices. Those are the big ones. And then the cash flow that goes with both of those, I would say. Amanda, if you have any specific follow-ups, you're welcome to raise your hand if you want to come on video or pop them into the chat, and I'm happy to come back and answer follow-ups. Okay, let's see. Next question. I want to support my team's health insurance costs, but I can't afford to sponsor a plan. What are my options? Okay, so this sort of comes down to, do you want it to be taxable or not taxable? Because you can always just reimburse people and it's additional compensation to them. So, if you have them get their own health insurance and you want to give them some money to, reimburse toward that, you can do that. But it's a business expense for you. Sorry, this is my first AMA in my new office, and I think we're gonna have to hardwire because yeah, the Wi-Fi is being a little funky. Thank you for bearing with me. So anyway, if you are okay with it being taxable, and again, it's a business expense for you, you're allowed to reimburse expenses, but your employees will then, that will be additional compensation to them. If you want to do it on a pre-tax basis, there's something called a QSERA or an ICSERA. There's a post on this on my blog that allows you to kind of do the accounting to have a third party say, these are qualified medical expenses and you gave pre-tax money and they qualify to receive pre-tax money. So there are, kind of guidelines of how much in a given month or year you can give a single person versus a family, and you can set it differently. So, you don't have to do the max. Like if you wanted to be able to give your employees $100 or $150 a month, and that's where you can start. That will allow you to get the tax benefit as well if you want to pay for that program, or allow them to get the tax benefit. So those are usually the two most, but again, you can just simply reimburse them some amount for their costs. It's just know that will show up on their W-2 as additional taxable income. And I think sometimes we look for okay, this is so weird. I've been here for 3 weeks and I've had no issues on any Zooms. Anyway, I was saying, I think sometimes we forget that we can just reimburse things, but it is taxable. So just to be aware of that, taxable to the employee. Okay, next one. My financial reports never seem to line up with my budget. What's going on? Probably cash accounting is what's going on. So when we make our budgets, we usually think of, hey, this month I billed this much, right? And I paid for this much, but sometimes the money doesn't come in within the calendar month. So, if you assumed you were going to make $10,000 this month, you sent out $10,000 in invoices, but only $8,000 got paid. It's not that you won't get that money in the future, but it's going to be reported in a different month. So, sometimes if we're, giving people 30 days to pay, or they're taking a longer time to pay, the money sort of shifts month to month. And so you won't get an exact match with when you build it and when you got it, because it only goes on your financial reports when you got it. The expenses you pay go on your financial reports when you pay them. So sometimes like your expenses will probably line up to your budget roughly like how you expect, but your revenue might not. And that's sort of, again, figuring out how to shorten your payment timelines if that is happening and you're really getting thrown off. There might be some ways to get paid faster or change your payment structure in order to like make that money closer to the time that you delivered the service or that you sold the goods. So that's something to think about. And if it's really becoming a problem for you, as you get to be a bigger business, there's a different method of accounting called accrual that many, tax professionals and controllers will encourage you to adopt. At a certain size of business, you have to do accrual accounting, or, if you have products above a certain size. But for most small businesses, you have the option, and it's simpler to do cash accounting. But, again, if you're finding consistently that like your numbers don't line up, it might be time to consider a different accounting method. And it's really technical. It doesn't really solve, but it will line up. I did this work and I billed this at the same time as the expenses. So 2 things to consider there: shorten your AR timelines and consider whether you need a different accounting methodology. And the third one is you should, really look through all of those reports and just make sure nothing's going on, like you haven't missed, or somebody did something funky, or, it's in the wrong category, or something isn't flowing into your accounting system, or, hopefully not, but fraud. So, definitely go through those reports and make sure what you think is there is there. And that isn't the issue. Most of the time, it's just an honest, like, something didn't get put into the system. But once in a while, it's not. So make sure you check. Okay, next question is about estimated taxes. So the Q2 estimated tax deadline is June 17th. So coming up next week. I have income so far this year, but I need it to pay my upcoming expenses. What do I do about my estimated taxes? Okay, so this is an interesting one because, yeah, we do have flow over, like, yes, we made this much to this point in the year, but it's already earmarked to be spent on something or, or to be paid. So a couple of things to think about. One is to talk to your accountant about, like, if you've reached a threshold where there could be a penalty, or maybe there's some amount you can pay, but not in its entirety. There's something called safe harbor, where based on the amount of taxes you paid the year before, you can pay a certain amount regardless of what your income was in the current year. So if you had, like, really low taxes last year, there might be a way to pay less right now. So you can potentially use your safe harbor benefit and pay less in taxes. Just make sure you're aware of it, because you have to pay it at some point. You have to pay it by the end of the year, but you have to pay it by next April. So, you may or may not want to get behind, but that's one thing to do. Another is to think about, you may be able to, like, recognize a prepaid expense or a prepaid cost. And, so that it's not on your P&L. That's a little bit of an accounting trick. But it, technically solves for, this money is really earmarked over here. We have to spend it. And if I pay these in taxes, I won't have a gain anymore. So again, these are accounting tricks, right? So there are some things that you can do with your tax accountant, with your bookkeeper or controller, and have the conversation. So, make sure it's with the 12th today. You have a couple of days, have the conversation and make sure you know what you're going to pay, what you need to pay, both state and federal, by the 17th, so that you get that in on time. Okay, question from Becky. What are the biggest hurdles you see clients struggling to clear when working towards scaling? Good question. I would say the first one is setting a limit on, like, a target for scaling, right? Not just as much as possible, as fast as possible. So there's no intention around the scale. So again, that's where you get that, like, 9 different choices, 9 different directions we could go, and we're going to try some of all of them, right? And then we kind of get a mess. So intentional scaling, I find people are much more successful when they're like, next year, I want to reach this revenue, this profit goal. I want to, like, focus on this line of business or this new line of business and growing that. I want to do these marketing activities. And this is the next step in our growth, right? And that might be 12 months, it might be 18 months, it might be 24 months, but kind of bounding the scale to say, this is the scale I'm looking for. These are the things I want to accomplish. And then at the point that you're approaching those, set the next bar, right? So you can go faster or slower, but I think what I have seen, it's really hard to meet a mushy goal like that, and people don't know what they're moving toward when it's just growth as fast as possible to make as much money as possible. Often then profitability goes out the window too. So, if we sort of know stages, then that's really helpful in focusing on scaling. Another is usually there are people involved. So it's that same challenge of growing pains, right? Of who do I hire? When do I hire them? How much do I pay? How do I manage them? Oh my gosh, this is a distraction, right? I never anticipated it was going to take this much time to manage these people. And, that can be challenging as well. Just for you, there's a lot of growth that goes with being the leader of the company, right? And managing people, being the boss, and in a small company, being HR, setting the policies, being the person that everyone goes to, and still having a job to do and owning and running the company. So there's definitely some mindset shifts around that. Sometimes you might end up paying someone more than you're making. I find like that one is a big hurdle. Like, if I'm not getting paid, why am I paying this person? Right. So it's again goes to like, what am I trying to accomplish? I'm curious, lots of the folks on here are doing scale. If you want to pop into the chat with, any challenges that you see as scale or with your clients or in your own companies. We definitely can have a little bit more dialogue around kind of scaling issues. But yeah, the stages, people, those are big ones. Another I think is just access to capital and comfort with debt, right? Because often if we do want to scale, there's a gap, right? We will make the money, but there's some point where our cash dips and it's a little bit negative. So before scaling, maybe getting a line of credit in place, getting comfortable, forecasting out, this is how long we need the line of credit, this is how deep into it we're going to go, or maybe a loan structure. But if you haven't had debt before, that can feel really daunting because it's a risk. And it's, part of your scale process and having that backup. But, I think it helps to know, like, yes, we did know for this 4 months we're going to have a dip, right? But our expectation is this will be happening by this date. And if things start to occur like you expect them to occur, like, I think that gives you comfort of, okay, we're going the right direction. It was a good investment, right? But, while you're in it, those few months, if you haven't had a dip in cash before, had to borrow money, that can be a really big psychological adjustment as well. And to not just shut everything down until the cash flow goes positive again, because it is a planned investment. So that's a big one. Yeah. Yeah, the first time you go through a cash flow issue, honestly, like, I have sat with many a client during their first cash crunch where week to week we are going through what came in, what do we need to pay, what's left, how are we going to make payroll, right? And just redoing that cash forecast every single week, right? It's triage. And it doesn't last forever, but it feels really weird because you're acutely aware of every dollar that goes in and out, right? You don't want to have to like hound people to pay you, but you need to get paid. So it's a really different it's a really different feeling to like have your first cash crunch. You'll get through it, but it does take a lot of vigilance. Yeah, refreshing Stripe every 2 seconds, absolutely. I have to say Stripe has this great feature if you use Stripe where you can get prepaid up to $10,000 in a day for like a 1% fee. They accelerate the payout. I've definitely partially used that on occasion because I'm like, well, I'm not going to put on my credit line if I can just get the money faster. So, yeah, there are lots and lots of cash flow tools. I think it's just, knowing how expensive, like what does it cost you to use them? And do you have them in place? Because once you explore one, you're going to get hit with all of them. It's going to be in all your ads. You're going to get every cabbage, every Amex loan, every every nerd wallet offer. And, they're going to show you their promo or best APR, the best interest rate. And you'll get over there and put your numbers in and it'll be astronomically different. But like you're already there and you're like, well, maybe I will just take the 22% interest because then I'll have it. So, things like that. If you're going to do that, like that's basically a credit card. So, I think sometimes we just, solve the problem and don't think through like what's the burden going to be on the business in addition, if we do it this way. So it is really worthwhile if you are in a cash crunch to just kind of line up, this is what's going in, this is what's going out, do it by week. And just, again, check in on that every week. What can we pay? What can we not pay? Often if you've been a really reliable, payer, you can talk to, your vendors about what's going on, and sometimes they'll give you a bit of grace. That also helps, push back when you need to pay. Your credit card deadlines aren't going to go for that, but, your Amex wants their money. But many others, folks, if they know you and you've been reliable, sometimes they'll give you a little more space. So it's worth asking. All right, so what did we end up on that one? Cash crunch, people, and staged growth. Yeah, okay. Let's see. I did not get that many questions this month, so I don't have a lot more. If there's other stuff from folks on the line live, I'll wait a couple of minutes if you want to put in something else. Otherwise, we'll wrap up a little early. Let's see. It's like, I feel like I need the Jeopardy music here. I can't see like on a text if somebody's typing, so I'm just gonna wait a second. Okay, great. Amanda says she has another one. Oh, not at all. That's why we're here. All right. Amanda, just a second to type out her question. Get through some of the other ones. Okay. So my first direct report, I got pretty close and now I'm seeing a dip in her performance. I'm struggling to provide feedback without pushback. Okay. Yeah, feedback is tough. I would say if you are new to like giving accountable feedback, the book Difficult Conversations is very good for this. Lots of negotiations professors recommend it, but it's about basically how to not have the message get lost of directly saying the hard thing, right? It's compassionate to be direct, but without being overly harsh or without letting it go without accountability. So Difficult Conversations is a really good resource if you're looking to like kind of prep yourself or get ready for these kinds of more challenging conversations where you feel like your feedback isn't being heard and responded to in a way that the other person has accountability. So there are challenges. Some folks don't want accountability, right? So if you know that the person that you're working with feels that way, that certainly can be a challenge. Like that they've just been raised in a corporate or personal environment where taking personal responsibility or saying I did something wrong isn't what you do, right? I worked with someone who had a water bottle that said deny, 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 right? Like you're not going to go into that office and have that person say, yeah, I screwed up, right? No, it's like nothing happened. Nothing happened. It wasn't me. So, if you do have that, it might be looking for like giving them space to know that like you're not looking to like fire them. You want to have a dialogue about it. So the more you can open it up as dialogue, you'll see if that person really is like resistant because of the current environment, maybe worried about being let go, and not wanting to interact with you versus, some people are just trained and built this way of, they do not want the accountability. The biggest thing is to decide how many times you're going to do feedback. Be really clear about, this is the issue I'm seeing. These are my expectations. This is the time for remediation. If you've had the conversation, it's not going anywhere, writing it down is helpful. In very small companies, you're not obligated to go through a remediation series like you are at big companies. If you have a small number of employees, in most states, actually in all states that I know of, you aren't saddled with someone who just truly isn't fitting on your team until you can go through a 6-month remediation process. You can let them go. But if you are, working with that person to try to work things out or to see, where they stand and can you bring things back, potentially like writing things down, having regular check-ins, like, again, going through, here's our progress. How do you feel like you're doing on this? Here are the things that I need. What do you need? That kind of conversation can be helpful. But there is a point where the person just may not be willing to play in this way, right? They may not want it to have accountability or may not want to change what they're doing. And that's, the point where you have to decide what's the impact of that on your team. And do you want to continue? What's the trade-off of not having that person or not having that role filled for a while? So it's definitely challenging. This is a learning curve for all managers, especially for those of us that, like to make people happy and want to help people succeed. Saying like, hey, we need you to do better at this, and here are the ways, trying to give concrete examples. That can be really hard. It's a hard conversation to have. Does that help in terms of, the issue that you're having? Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say like give it, yeah, you need a little breathing room. Like you can't every day be like, okay, now here's a new thing today. And sometimes that's hard because you want to address things as they come up. So, kind of once you're in this feedback loop, making sure that you're giving them 7 to 10 days or an agreed amount of time to like show improvement or do better. Otherwise, they're just going to feel like, they can't do anything right. So yeah, it's definitely challenging on these small teams where day to day we are working really closely together and really relying on people. Okay. Any other questions? Right. Well, if not, then I hope you all have a great rest of the month. Our next date, I will be coming you live from my parents' basement. Always an adventure. My dad is very excited to set up an office for me in the basement, just like he did when we came back from Spain. So I will be shivering in a Wisconsin basement the second Tuesday in July. And if you have any questions along the way, you can always email hello@the.Jill.James, get them that way. The AMA submission link is available too. So, send in your questions throughout the month, or you're always welcome to bring them onto the AMA Live. So thank you everybody for joining. Have a great June, and I will see you next month. Bye.